Today's lesson is about how to calculate the surface area of a cylinder. So quick reminder, a cylinder is a solid with two congruent parallel bases that are both circles. Remember, this is a lot like a prism, which has two congruent parallel bases that are parallelograms. The only difference is here the bases are circles instead. Now, because cylinders are essentially prisms with circle bases, you can actually derive or invent the surface area formula for cylinders by starting with the formula for surface area for prisms. So first, write down the formula you already know for prism surface area. Surface area equals pH plus 2b, where p is perimeter of the base, h is height of the prism, and capital B is area of the bases. Now, if we look at our bases, for our cylinder, they're circles, so the perimeter is the same thing as circumference, and circumference is 2 pi r. And the capital B, area of the base, is the same thing as your formula for circle area, pi r squared. So now we know what P and capital B are. We can plug those in for P and B in our surface area formula. If you replace P with 2 pi r, it becomes 2 pi r times h instead of P times h. If you replace capital B with pi r squared, it becomes plus 2 pi r squared at the end of the formula instead of plus 2b. So this is your official formula for surface area of a cylinder, 2 pi rh plus 2 pi r squared. Find the surface area. Leave in terms of pi. So first write down your surface area formula, 2 pi rh plus 2 pi r squared. Then you want to plug in what the r and the h are into that formula. So the r is the radius. If you look at the radius of the base here, it's 2. So that would plug in two places. It would place the r here and would place the r here. And then the h, the height of the whole prism, is 7. Now, an important thing about calculating surface area is to remember order of operations. You know how in PEMDAS it reminds you that you have to do all the multiplication before doing any addition when you're simplifying an expression? That's important here. If you do the math in the wrong order, you actually get the wrong answer for surface area. So because there's a plus sign here, and that's what you do last after all the multiplication, that's actually your very last step. So you're going to multiply these numbers first, and these numbers, and then you'll add to solve. Oh, and don't forget in PEMDAS, E is for exponents, so you have to do exponents before you do anything else. So you're going to first do the 2 squared. So now you have 2 squared is really 4. And then one thing I like to do that's kind of optional, some people do this step in their head, is you want to eventually move the pi to the end of each section. So I just moved the pi after the 7, so the 2 times 2 times 7 was in front. Basically, I wanted the normal numbers next to each other and the pi at the end. And same here. I figured out 2 squared was 4, and I just moved the pi after that, so now it was 2 times 4, and then the pi. Because if you move the pi to the end, it's a little bit easier to do the normal number multiplying math all at once. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 7 is 28. Bring down the plus sign in the pi, 2 times 4 is 8, so that becomes 8 pi. Now that I've simplified each half of the expression, I can finally add them. Notice how these two pieces are like terms because they both end the same way. They both end in pi. So if I have 28 pi's here and 8 pi's here, I could add them up and say 36 pi square centimeters is the full surface area of my cylinder. Go ahead and try question 2. Copy down your surface area formula, plug in your r and your h, and then simplify. When you plug in r and h, it should look like that. Simplify exponents first and move the pi's to the end of each piece of the expression. Multiply the terms in each section of the expression together. 2 times 3 times 5 is 30. 2 times 9 is 18. And finally, add the like terms. You should get 48 pi square inches for the surface area for this cylinder. As a general rule of thumb, leave your answers in terms of pi unless the specific problem asks you not to. If it says something about, for example, rounding to nearest decimal, that implies you actually want to multiply by 3.4, but otherwise just leave it with a pi symbol at the end. Pause here and try the next two on your own. Check your answer for number 3. Notice how for this one, you actually had to figure out what the radius was first. So if you didn't get this answer, you probably just accidentally used the whole diameter of 10 and didn't notice you'd have to half it and use 5 for the radius instead. Same here, you'd have to half 3.2, which would be 1.6, and that would be your radius. Now, a quick note for those of you who don't like writing a lot, you could streamline your work a little bit. You can, after the plugging in step, I always want to see this step in your work, by the way. Always show the radius and the height that you plugged into your full formula. You could then just mentally or on your calculator multiply the numbers in each section. So for example, here you could just straight after writing your expression, write in your calculator 2 times 1.6 times 1.8. Oh, that's 5.76, and move the pi to the end. And then 1.6 squared times that answer by 2. Oh, that gets me this. And then for your last step, add your like terms. So if you really want to streamline your work, this would be the minimum to show. Pause here and try questions 5 and 6 on your own. Go ahead and check your answer on 5. And check your answer on number 6. Next, your first word problem with surface area of cylinders. The height of a cylinder is 3 times the diameter of the base. The surface area of the cylinder is 126 pi square feet. What is the radius of the base? So one thing I like to do with word problems in general is summarize the information they give me as a list of variables on the side. So when they say that the height of the cylinder is 3 times the diameter of the base, I'll summarize that by saying h for height equals 3d for diameter. And when they say the surface area of the cylinder is 126 pi, I'll write that as SA equals 126 pi. I also like to make a note of what they're asking for. They're asking what is the radius of the base, so I'll make a note to myself. R equals question mark. That's what I'm trying to solve for, is R. Since they're telling us the answer to surface area of a cylinder, let's start with our formula for cylinder surface area. Now, here's the deal. If we plug in what we know, that means we could replace SA, surface area, with 126 pi, and H with 3 times D. But here's the problem with plugging in 3D here. That means we're going to have more than one variable in the same problem. We'll have both R's and D's, which would make it really difficult to solve. Ideally, we'd have only one variable, and the variable we really want is radius, R. So we want to think of a way to rewrite 3 times D, so it's using R's instead. Now, here's the deal. You know how diameter is all the way across the center of a circle and radius is halfway across? So you could say every diameter is really 2 of a radius. So you could really say 3 diameters is the same thing as 3 diameters times 2. 6 radii. So if you just say each diameter is really 2 radii, the 3 times diameter is really 3 times 2 radii, 6 radii total. So what you could do then is replace the 3 diameters here with 6 R here. And now you have only R's in the problem, which makes it much easier to solve. So a lot like the previous problems, you want to move normal numbers to the front to make it easier to combine with other normal numbers. So you can move the 6 here mentally and say, well, that 2 times 6 is really 12. And then you know how you have the pi left, and then you have two r's left in the same section of your expression. R times r is really r squared. So when you simplify this first half, it really became 12 pi r squared. And then you could bring down the plus 2 pi r squared after that. Now, something interesting about this expression, I want you to notice how both the 12 and the 2 end the same. They both are followed by pi r squared. Pi r squared here and pi r squared here. So they're like terms because they have the same endings, which means you can add them up. It's kind of like having a 12x plus a 2x. You know how you could just add the coefficient numbers, 12 plus 2 is 14, and say, oh, that's 14x. You could do that here. You could say 12 pi r squared plus 2 pi r squared is 14 pi r squared. Notice how when you're adding like terms, the answer ends the same way. A good rule of thumb to remember is that when you add like terms, the answer is the same like term. Now you are so close to having your problem solved for radius. So circle the r squared and think about how you'd get it by itself. To cancel it to times 14 pi, you would divide both sides of your expression by 14 pi. That cancels out the pi on the other side as well, and 126 divided by 14 is 9. So now you've got the r squared by itself. If r squared equals 9, you only have to cancel out the square on the r to know what radius is. So if you square root both sides of the expression, you get that your radius is 3. And your units for the original problem were feet, so 3 feet is your radius. Really quick, I want to show you one more explanation or visual of why your surface area formula for cylinders works. So look at this cylinder. If I keep in mind that surface area really means the area of the outsides, all added up, or you could think of it as how much wrapping paper would it take to cover the outside of a shape. Let's see what happens if we essentially unroll the wrapping paper covering this cylinder. If I unroll it, I have, in terms of wrapping paper, two circles, 2 pi r squared. That's where the 2 pi r squared comes from. And then for the lateral area around the middle of the shape, it's really a rectangle where the base is 2 pi r, the circumference of one circle, and then times h, the height of the cylinder, to get the full rectangle area. And that's where the 2 pi r h part of the formula comes from. All right, so last thing I want you to do in today's notes is practice from last lesson. See if you remember how to calculate surface area of a prism. So you're using surface area equals pH plus 2b. Pause here until you're done. Go ahead and check your answer on number 8. For the base, the rectangle here, the perimeter would be 20 plus 8 plus 20 plus 8, so that would be 56 total, and the area would be base times height for that little rectangle, so 20 times 8, or 160. Plug those in, along with 16 for h, the height of the prism, and you get 1,216 square centimeters. Now, number 9 was a triangular prism. Let's see how these two triangles are the bases. So if you look at those bases, you add up the sides. So the two triangles are congruent. So if this edge is 20, then this front edge here also is 20. So you do know all three sides right away. So 16 plus 12 plus 20 gets you perimeter. Area, because this side works as the height of your triangle, you just do 1/2 base times height. You should get 672 square centimeters for your final answer. Great job, everybody. Don't forget to turn in your notes on Schoology when you're done.